This episode of The Trap Set is brought to you in part by Colectivo Coffee. Handmade coffee since 1993. Check them out online at colectivo.com.
This is Joe Wong. Welcome to The Trap Set, where each week we explore the lives of drummers. I want to play something for you. You're hearing Mother of Mercy by Samhain, featuring my guest, London May, on drums. London began drumming at an early age, and as a teenager joined Reptile House, featuring one of my favorite songwriters of all time, Daniel Strasser, aka Daniel Higgs of Lungfish fame. Soon, London went on to join another iconic frontman, Glenn Danzig, in Samhain. A longtime resident of Los Angeles, London works as a pediatric nurse, but he remains creatively active in multiple fields. As an actor, he's set to film a new sci-fi series, Emulated Flux, in January. He also recently released Devolution, a rarities and live anthology spanning the first 12 years of his career. And now my conversation with London May.
We settled in Baltimore in the early 70s. I think we moved to Baltimore maybe in 74.
And what kind of things were you into as a younger kid?
Monster movies, movies in general. I was really into the newspaper. I don't know. That was kind of a hobby of mine.
Like a news junkie, or would you read the comics or something?
Yeah, kind of a news junkie. And what else was I into? A lot of bubblegum music. And what else? I don't know, Glenn Campbell, radio shows, Dr. Demento, kid stuff.
And were you a happy kid?
Well, I have a happy life now, so it all kind of works out. I think I was happy. God, that's a crazy question. I've never even thought about something that straightforward. Was I a happy kid? I want to think that I was, but my behaviors might have said something else. I was basically a troublemaker. So some people might think that says that I was, kind of a discontent.
What kind of trouble did you like to cause?
You name it. I was, even from kindergarten, I had problems with authority. I had problems with settling down. I had, I wasn't like a violent kid, but I was always like, I don't know, doing pranks and just being generally, I wasn't like the class clown, but I was definitely a troublemaker.
Did your folks have a pretty laissez-faire attitude, or were they taken aback by your behavior and try to control you?
Well, my parents did everything they possibly could. They really were really great to me. And this has come up before in interviews, and so I have to be kind of sensitive about it because, I don't want to... Wow.
Well, I'm just saying, like, some parents might say, okay, well, this is our kid. This is the energy that he has. That's okay. Like, let's let him figure it out.
Well, my parents tried a lot of different stuff. They said I went to a bunch of different schools. They tried to find, if I was a square peg in a round hole, they tried to find that
Square hole?
that square hole for me, so I would be more successful. So I went to Montessori school,
Right.
which is a little more
Laid back.
And then I went to 2 different high schools, and I think I kind of exhausted them to the point that they had tried everything, and then something kind of clicked in me, which kind of straightened me out, which, believe it or not, was music.
Do you remember what it was that clicked with you musically? Was it when you started playing?
Well, I started playing drums before I got into punk rock. And so for me, playing drums was still... Before I got into punk rock, I was just into like...
Kiss?
No, I was never a Kiss guy. I was
Okay.
more of a Who guy.
A Who guy. All right.
A Who guy was definitely, was my inspiration for drumming. And Who guy...
Did you identify with the energy of Keith Moon and his whole
Absolutely.
attitude?
Absolutely.
Okay, this is my guy.
Yeah, this is my guy. Yeah, so he made perfect sense. That made perfect sense as kind of an icon, as a wild man, a troublemaker. Everybody was always laughing around him. He was kind of the sad clown, because you could tell behind that exterior there was, maybe some undercurrents of melancholy, which I could identify with. I could always kind of see it in his eyes.
Inside yourself, is that just something that you feel like you figured out that's just part of who you've always been? Like that melancholy? And that when you find music, you figure out a way to channel it?
I probably didn't know it then. I might know it now. I think back then I was just trying to find myself and trying to find that some sort of identity, because I never felt that I fit in any group.
Right.
I definitely felt more at home when I got into punk rock and started hanging out with punk rockers and skaters. That felt closer to my real self than what where I had tried to kind of fit in before. So that's... Punk rock is where I found part of my voice.
Did you have an idea for what you wanted to do with your life?
No, I still don't. I'm working on that. I'll get back to
Is
me.
it something you need to work on, or are you comfortable not knowing?
Well, I'm always up for a surprise, and everything has been a gift up until this point.
Has it been a gift, or has it been something that you've worked really hard for?
Most people will say that I've worked really hard for it. I don't think that I've done... for everything that I have and everything that I've accomplished in my life, it seems like I was just kind of in the right place at the right time. There's people that are so much better than me and so much more deserving of stuff.
But do you think you have the right combination of things that attracts interesting opportunities? Like maybe you have the right attitude or the right look, or like combined with whatever chops you have musically?
Well, I generally say yes to everything.
Yeah.
Which is a good start for anybody out there. Say yes to anything, because you never know where it will lead.
Did Reptile House have a really tight aesthetic vision?
No, not even.
Because I feel like when you look at somebody like Higgs, I know that I've listened to lots of Reptile House. Then I saw how he evolved and moved to San Francisco and worked for Ed Hardy, and then did the Lungfish thing, and now he's doing like solo banjo records and other stuff that's even farther out.
Well, the thing that always struck me about Danny was he had a very charismatic, kind of dark, exciting energy about him. And he also was a amazing artist, not
visual artist.
Visual artist, yeah. His drawing and everything was, I mean, one of my most prized possessions is one of his sketchbooks that he left at my house. And just all the flyers that he would do for us. He was very into comic books. He was very into to drawing, and he was into, do I call his lyrics were very poetic, and just his reams and reams and reams of writing, which I really, really connected with. And most of my drumming and most of my arrangement for Reptile House was based around fitting his lyrics into music in ways that I imagined it, not necessarily the way that he imagined it.
Well, were you doing other things in your life at the time, or was that your main focus? Did you go to college? Were you pursuing a career?
Oh, shit. In Reptile House, I was 14 to 17. So
okay, so you were still in high school.
I was still in high school. And, getting grades good enough. A lot of my parents at one point finally broke down and gave me the freedom, and they became open enough to accept me as a punk rocker and as somebody who looked different and somebody had a different schedule, somebody who could go to shows and be out until 3:00 in the morning, but wasn't coming home wasted and wasn't, crashing cars and impregnating girls and, doing all the kinds of crazy stuff that high school kids were doing. I was doing stuff that on the outside looked kind of wild. I looked kind of wild, and I was in these wild bands and
so you weren't into drugs or drinking?
No, I was straight edge.
Yeah,
I was straight edge, and that was also a big factor in getting my, being involved with people who looked really crazy, but actually had very, lived a very clean and sort of healthy lifestyle. We skated and played music.
Yeah,
and that was kind of what we were about. And so the DC straight edge minor threat thing to me was super important to turning, me from a, kind of a screw up into somebody who could be productive and use that. You turn that energy that got me into trouble and channel that into something that was productive.
So you're in high school. You're doing Reptile House. Mm-hmm. You're pouring all of your energy into it and skating by in school.
Yeah, because I wanted to do good enough in school that my parents couldn't use my music as saying, look, you need to put more time into school. I had to dedicate enough time to school that the heat would be off me for playing music and being gone on the weekends, because I was on the road at 15.
Right.
And so if I wasn't going to drop out of school, because then my parents would kick me out.
Yes.
So it forced me into doing decently enough in school that they would allow me to continue to do my music and be able to, have their support, which was important. We practiced at the house. Reptile House practiced at my house for years.
Yeah, that's very similar to how I was in high school. I was not interested in drinking or drugs, and I was too much of a wimp to pursue girls. So all of my energy went towards music.
Yeah,
and I think about it, and it's kind of crazy that my parents let me tour when I was a teenager. I don't know if people would let their kids do that now.
Oh, I couldn't.
There were no cell phones. It's like
there's no GPS.
Yeah.
There was no texting, I'll be there in 5 minutes. No, it was all very, very different. And yes, my parents and your parents had to take a huge leap of faith. And I think they saw that in me, and obviously they saw that in you, that you weren't going to take advantage of that. And that's where that trust built up. And that was important, because I had broken their trust so many times. I said I'd be somewhere and I wasn't.
You were in Samhain.
Mm-hmm.
How did you join the band?
I got Glenn's number, and I started bothering him about playing Baltimore. And they came down and played Baltimore. Reptile House, of course, opened for them again. And then I stayed in contact with Glenn. And then when Steve left the band, Glenn asked me if I would come up and audition, which I did secretly from Reptile House. Maybe because I thought I wouldn't get the gig, so I didn't need to tell them anyway. But I went up anyway, and I auditioned, and I got the job, and I came back and I told the band, and it was pretty rough because we had the record on Dischord had just come out, and we were getting ready to do this U.S. tour, and I knew that when I came home that I was moving up to New Jersey, and so that tour was pretty rough. That last Reptile House tour was pretty rough because I think in their mind, I was one of those employees who would quit but had those last 2 weeks.
Right.
And what do most employees do? They fuck off. They don't give a shit.
Yeah.
They're just filling out that last bit of time as a commitment, but their heart's not into it.
It's also, at that point in your life, and especially in that scene, I would imagine that a band is like a family. It's not just like, okay, we'll swap him out for another drummer in town or something like that, right?
Yeah, it was very close-knit, and we were all pretty close. I mean, it was pretty chummy. We had our makeups and breakups like any relationship, especially a bunch of teenagers, and especially having, a person like Danny in the band, having a person like me in a band. I'm not perfect either.
You've got that melancholy thing going for you.
Well, melancholy thing with a really ambitious streak, that sometimes is counterintuitive to just like letting things go. I can also be very assertive, and sometimes my vision doesn't necessarily, and my timeline don't necessarily match with other people's. Sometimes that stuff has got to happen organically, and sometimes I know that I have a ability to, or maybe a disability to, push things too far too fast.
Which is counterproductive.
Exactly, because if things aren't meant to be, they're not meant to be. But a lot of times, I probably wouldn't be here right now if I hadn't pushed things to happen.
Well, you moved up to New Jersey, and you joined your fantasy band.
Absolutely.
How did reality compare to your hopes for what it would be?
The stress set in immediately. The anxiety and stress of being in a completely different world musically was there immediately because I started recording November Coming Fire within a week of joining the band. And whereas Reptile House was a band that rehearsed all the time, after 3 years, we only had maybe 12 songs, maybe 15 songs, some songs didn't quite make the cut at the end. We didn't have that much material. And that material that we did have was based on jam sessions, and joining Samhain there was one person who dictated how the song should go and what everybody should play. And so that was a big change for me because he was the sole writer and he could play all the instruments. And so he would tell you exactly how the part should be. And sometimes, and it was really, at that point, it really didn't make sense to me because he wasn't a drummer.
Right.
So some of the stuff that he would show me would be really backwards and really awkward for me to play. It never felt natural. It always felt, but it was the right thing for the song, and I kind of didn't get that. I always was trying.
You wanted to insert yourself into it,
or what I thought a drummer should do. Like, okay, I get what you're saying, but now I'm gonna like kind of
make it better,
or like make it like a drummer would play.
Yeah, right.
And that's never what he wanted. He always, still to this day, still to our reunion, our 30th anniversary reunion, still, any time that I've tried to improve on that formula, it's not worked out well for me. I've always had to go back to the most primitive and the most basic thing that he showed me.
Yeah. So how do you find a space in there to make it your own and enjoy your time or find some sort of creative fulfillment?
So how I found my place was when I heard the rough mixes of the songs with him singing, and it all made sense. And I just went, wow, that's why I'm here. That's what I'm a part of. And I will find a way to fit into this, because in his world, it all makes sense, and he's got a vision of the song so far in advance of what he's showing us that you just have to trust in him. And you have to realize that, though I don't see it, doesn't necessarily mean it's wrong or that I need to play something different. If I play exactly what he's looking for, I'm going to make him happy, and he's going to be able to create the music that is going to be more important than me getting my drum, getting my drum boner on, or
getting your drum rocks off.
Yeah, having that satisfaction of like, oh, I did something really
clever.
Fancy,
or
clever. Yeah, that's stuff that appeals to you're a drummer.
Sure.
All that clever stuff appeals to us.
Yeah,
but the rest of the world, it's not that important.
How would you describe your personal dynamic in the band?
Back then or more recently?
Yeah, how was it back then, and how has it evolved?
In the past, me and Glenn were like oil and water. I was so stubborn, and I was so punk rock, and I was so anti-authority, and I just couldn't be told what to do, and I just didn't get his... I just thought he was being... What's the word for it? I just kind of thought it was... I thought he was just way too serious. It was way too serious. And everything was really do or die for him. And I just never understood that as a teenager. And so my reaction to that was to always push back against that. And instead of just... I did more talking than listening. And where I should have been appreciative of his stories and his giving me advice and stuff, I was always really closed off to it. And because I had some limited success with doing things my way in Baltimore, I had kind of risen up the ranks pretty quickly as a promoter and as a drummer. I was looked on, I had a lot of smoke blown up my ass as a drummer and as a little scene hotshot, because I had booked these shows, I had booked these tours, I had gotten these records out. So I came into it with a little bit of an attitude and an ego. And then I meet Glenn, and all of a sudden, he goes from being my idol to all of a sudden like, oh, we're on the same level.
In your mind.
Not. Yeah, on my mind, we're on the same level.
Yeah.
Like, don't school me on this, because I know this and I know that, and I'm not just some little kid from Baltimore. And in actuality, I was. I had a little bit to bring to the table, but I really needed to assert myself in a lot of situations, which were not, not productive. And now I look back and I just go like, God, I'm so grateful that he tolerated that.
And then how has your relationship evolved over the years?
Well, I've come to accept him as the person that he is, and not the person that I want him to be, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
Sometimes you have people in your family that you
keep trying to force them to be somebody that they're not.
Yeah.
Or feeling let down when they're not.
Yeah, you just have these
living up to your
expectations that we're going, he's genuine. He's not an act. His art and his way of seeing things has to be respected, and I do respect it. Look at his work. For me to be in the same breath as him, I'm a lucky dude. I'm a really lucky dude.
The Trap Set will always be available for free, but we rely on donations from our listeners. Please visit our website at thetrapset.net and click donate. Subscribe to our show on iTunes, and if you enjoy what you hear, give us a review.
Now, when I first met you, you were at a show that we did for this podcast, and then we went out afterwards, and you told me that you are a nurse as well.
Yeah.
When did that start?
I saw this movie. I think it's called Doc Holliday. Is it called Dr. Hollywood? Doc Holliday?
Is it the one with Michael J. Fox?
The one with Michael J. Fox.
Dr. Hollywood.
Dr. Hollywood.
Right? Doc Hollywood?
Doc Hollywood.
He drives out. He's on his way out to L.A. to become a plastic surgeon.
Correct.
Then he breaks down in a little town, right?
Right.
Or he gets in trouble.
He crashes his car, and his car is stuck in town for a while, and he becomes this like kind of small town hero.
Yeah.
And
meets a beautiful girl in that town.
Exactly.
And stays there.
And he gets all this respect, not because, I mean, he's kind of a screw up, but because he's a doctor, he has this built-in respect already there. And he's able to
I love it. I love that this movie changed your life.
It really did. It made me, I was like, I'm going to be a doctor.
So you were just at a point in your life where you were ready to hear a message too.
I think so. I think I needed something, because the music thing was something that I worked so hard on for so long.
Yes.
And was so dedicated. And then something would happen.
Yeah.
And it would get taken away from me. And I'd be left with nothing. All the years and all the experience.
It's something that I mean, that's why I started the show. Because I wanted to figure out how other people navigate through that.
But I wanted something that could not be taken away from me on somebody else's whim. Everything happens for a reason. But
Do you believe that?
Oh yeah. I look back at things that I didn't get, the things that I thought that I was so robbed from, and I look back a couple years later and I go, "Thank you, universe, for not letting me have what I wanted and giving me
what you needed.
What I needed, or just making me go somewhere else and do something else. Like, let's make the best out of that situation, and it would put me on a different path that I'm much more happy that I mean, the nursing thing, if I hadn't been, fired from a band that left me with one of those, that Charlton Heston in front of the Statue of Liberty moments where you go, God, what the hell just happened here?
Yeah.
I'm completely lost. I have no idea where I'm going. What's it all worth? And if that hadn't happened, I wouldn't have gone back to school and said, hey, I need to find a skill that I can do something that appeals to me, which is blood and guts and helping people and doing something that's exciting.
What kind of nurse are you?
I'm a pediatric nurse.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I work with kids.
And how long have you been doing it?
23 years. I've been at my current job for 19 years. Yeah.
My mom is an RN. And
you mentioned that. Yeah.
She worked in an ER for most of my childhood. She works in a clinic now, but at the time that I was growing up, she worked in an ER, and she always came back with the coolest stories.
I tell you,
just crazy shit.
And it really puts things in perspective for her. I'm sure she has a different outlook on things because of what she sees and how she has to handle things of that nature, and how regular life, how she probably is able to soothe, the family and other things that happen that are just kind of day-to-day stuff.
Okay, you're a nurse, you have a career, and you also figure out, okay, this doesn't preclude me from being creative and playing in bands and playing drums.
It never did.
Did it feel really good? Did you feel like, okay, I have a life, I have a career, it's all figured out?
Nah, no.
You wanted more.
No.
What did you want? What else did you want?
Well, I mean, what is any, perpetual 12, 14-year-old kid want? He wants to be, a rock star. He wants to be a movie star. I wanted to be a movie star. I wanted to be a rock star. I wanted to fly around on a jet plane and be on the red carpet and do all this, rock star stuff and have all that.
Have you gotten to do any of that stuff?
Sure. Not as a, I've gotten to.
Not as a what?
As a band member.
Yeah. Not as a star.
Not as a star, exactly.
And so you work with kids at the hospital. Do you have any kids?
Mm-hmm. I have a 20-year-old son who's an adult,
What does he do?
He's in college right now. He's studying business, so hopefully he can take over my books.
He can take care of you?
Yeah. He'll manage my paltry estate at some point.
Were you married to his mom?
Yeah. I've been divorced now for, almost 20 years.
Is his mom a business-minded person?
No, not necessarily. I'm not sure where he got that from. He grew up in Tennessee, so
okay.
My interaction was twice a year. He'd come out here and we'd hang out. And
was that hard?
Absolutely. Oh, that was a very tough decision to have that separation, but I have always operated from the standpoint of if I stay in Chattanooga, or we were living in Louisville, Kentucky at that point, I'm not going to be a happy person. I would rather be a happy dad in California than a miserable dad in Kentucky or Tennessee.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had to do what was right for me. Sometimes it doesn't make sense to the other person, but me not getting a, I don't know. I'd rather see Joe. If us working together day to day would make us not friends, I'd rather just see you on the
right. See me once a year.
See you once a year.
Yeah.
And so it was never directly against him. It was just the environment. I lived in Louisville for 3 years. That was something that me and my ex-wife had decided on because she had family in Chattanooga, and so we lived there. And it wasn't really a great move for me. It was really tough on me, and it really I needed to come back out to California. And if he wasn't going to come out to California, then we were going to be separated.
Mm-hmm.
And so I did the best that I could with trying to get him to enjoy the California lifestyle, and it never really took to him.
Would you just be a drummer if that was an option? Or
Sure.
just be an actor?
Sure.
You wouldn't miss nursing?
No, I would miss nursing.
Yeah.
I would. I mean, I've never not done nursing, as busy as my life has been over the last, 20 years. I've always kept my gig as a nurse because, I enjoy it. The hours are long, and it's a grind of a shift, and it's an incredibly stressful job. I mean, it takes a lot, and the older I get, the more it takes out of me.
Mm-hmm.
But the more certainly in the last 10 years, I've grown to appreciate it so much. Before it was like, oh, this is pretty cool. This is a good gig. And now I realize the importance of that gig in the scope of things, is going to choke me up. But it may be more important than any fucking music shit that I ever do.
London May, thanks for being here.
Thanks very much, Joe. It's been my pleasure.
The Trap Set is produced by me, Joe Wong, along with Chris Karwowski, who also edits the program. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at The Trap Set, and visit our website, thetrapset.net, to subscribe to our show for free. If you enjoyed what you heard today, please donate to our show. If If you can't afford to donate, please tell a friend and give us a good rating on iTunes. Send your feedback and guest requests to thetrapset@gmail.com.